Hello and good afternoon and welcome to our event, the T-Level 9-month countdown. Where are you now in terms of your strategic leadership? Just while people are coming in, can I draw your attention to the slide? We have a few things we think would be worthy well known about. First of all, we have the Provider Insight Days coming up in Newcastle-under-Lyme, Liverpool City College and Fareham College. These days provide a chance for you to learn firsthand from successful Wave 1 and Wave 2 T-Level and T-Level transition program providers. So you get a chance to see what they're doing, you get a chance to network with other Wave 4 providers. The hosts showcase their provision, share their approach, discuss considerations and lessons learned from the T-Level and T-Level transition program journey. So it's a good opportunity to meet people face to face, find out what's going on. We also have the T-Level National Learning Event, which is to support attendees to develop a strategic vision and plan for your T-Level programs, identifying strategies to assess the effectiveness of your program delivery and to network with other Wave 4 and Wave 5 providers. And finally, tomorrow, for those of you who might be interested, there is a question and answer event, 9:30 in the morning, to gain insight from Wave 1 and Wave 2 providers where you can ask questions of the panel. So the links are in the chat and you can register for those throughout this meeting and after. So moving to the meeting itself, as I said, thank you all for coming. My name is Tony and I'm a T-Level advisor at the Association of Colleges, and I will be hosting this event along with my colleague Richard and others who will be operating behind the scenes and facilitating the breakout sessions. So housekeeping rules, please, if I may. Usual, please mute your microphones and switch off your cameras to reduce background noise. Please submit any questions via the chat on the bottom toolbar. As you can see, the main presentation is being recorded and will be shared with all participants after the meeting. And if your username does not identify who you are, please right-click on your name, rename yourself to someone is you. Okay, aims of the event. We are going to examine 5 key themes of strategic leadership in preparation for September 2023. We're going to benefit from the experience of New College Durham, a Wave 2 2020 provider. We're going to analyse where you are now against where you should be, and we're going to provide you an opportunity to network with other 2023 Wave 4 providers. So, the afternoon is based around 5 strategic themes, and these are marketing and destinations, employee engagement, replacements, curriculum planning, and professional readiness. Now, these have been decided after consultation with Wave 1 and 2 providers who believe these to be the priorities in terms of your planning. Some of you may be far ahead with these and others may realise that you've got a lot to do. So, the agenda for this afternoon's meeting, we're in a moment going to meet Chris Cherry from the Strategic Development Network, is going to look at the 5 key themes of strategic leadership in preparation for September 2023. We will then have a presentation from Jenna Allen, who is the higher level technical skills manager at New College Durham. We will have breakout rooms and then a feedback session and then some reminders. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to Chris.
Thanks, Tony. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 9-month countdown. Gosh, it's 9 months. It will soon go, and we'll soon have September 23 on top of us. So what I want to do this afternoon is just to kind of present some of the thoughts around what those 5 strategic leadership themes are and try and unpack them a stage further, which will allow us in our breakout groups to try and discuss further how much work we have to do inside our colleges to prepare for September, and actually what other resource we might need to bring to bear, but also an opportunity to know who to ask questions of. So it could be you'll be talking to other college colleagues, you'll be talking obviously to Jenna this afternoon as well, about how you start to address some of these key themes as well. So have the next slide, please, Richard. So our first area, so marketing, progression, marketing destinations. As far as the T-level program is concerned, it's still relatively new. We've had sort of 3 to 4 years of delivery, but we've had that in amongst all of the COVID situation we found ourselves in. And obviously policy and the way in which we implement T-levels, especially industry placements, has had to evolve alongside it. So it hasn't quite bedded down fully. We haven't quite got a single model of industry placements that we know work, and ways in which we can deliver them are still very, very flexible. And even now, even this month, with the new guidance for industry placements, talks about ways in which we can start to integrate new forms of placements. But that said, there are still a number of case studies out there of colleges who have delivered successfully T-levels that you can use to describe how a successful T-level program might work. So you might be thinking in terms of the areas you're going to be delivering, how you might sell that to employers in particular, but also to young people, their parents and peers as well. We're starting to get destination data from the completed T-levels, and it's a good picture in terms of HE progression and progression on to other apprenticeship programs that go on from level 3, probably level 4, and some HE as well. And obviously the audience for this is going to be the young people in particular, but also the schools. So the way in which we interact with those kind of GCSE providers who are seeding us with learners for T-level programs. How are they implementing T-levels? How are T-levels being described internally as well? Then, of course, we've got the kind of demand side. We've got employers who hear out there about T-levels. They may well be very engaged in the concept of a work experience program, which is 2 weeks tasted in the summer, but T-levels aren't like that. They're something a little bit different. And they're also probably thinking about apprenticeships on the other side of the employment coin. So they've got a number of programs in front of them. How do we describe industry placements as being a kind of fully grown up program that we can describe that isn't work experience, but it isn't an apprenticeship either? How we can start to bring employers into the fold as well. And some employers are starting to ask questions about, well, when is our subject area coming into focus? When do we start our T-levels? And also a lot of knowledge of some regional groups like LEPs, for example, or regional networks of employers who say, we know about T-levels, we think we can offer placements, but we don't yet have the right relationships with our college colleagues as well. So how do we get T-levels to fit in amongst all the other programs that we're working with as well, and to differentiate them between A-level programs, apprenticeship programs, and other sort of study programs as well? How do we get T-levels to be an addition to the kind of learning and skills mix rather than replacing one with the other? That's the first thing to have a think about and have a talk about as well. Thank you. Richard, next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So sort of 3 or 4 years ago, the progression to HE was still an evolving picture. So some universities were unclear as to how a T-level entry program might actually work. Well, we've now got some entry data for HE. So again, we might be able to weave that into our marketing as well. And also, of course, the destinations at the other end. So if not HE as in going to university, but what about degree apprenticeships, integrated programs whilst in employment? There are a number of case studies around that, especially in digital, where there are some very clear tracks for further and higher learning as well. So about ways in which we could start to create those pathways. So are we having conversations about what progression might look like in those occupational areas that we're looking to be delivering in September as well? One of the key marketing messages of T-levels in general is about the talent pipeline. So it's an opportunity for employers to have a soft recruitment process through a placement that will turn into an employment opportunity as well. So there is quite a lot of emerging data from sources outside of the education world that talk about employers thinking actually that T-levels and employing T-level learners is a good way of growing our own talent in a relatively risk-free environment, because it's not about taking somebody on for a job and seeing if it works out. Placements are an opportunity to do that with very low risk to the employer, but where it adds significant value to the learner. Okay, let's move on to the next area. Thank you, Richard. So this is about, obviously, then the employer engagement bit. Let's build on our discussions with employers as well. So one of the things in the earlier waves that we've tried to address collectively is the conflict and overlap with the A-level program and the apprenticeship program. So perhaps some of the messages to employers talks more about work experience than an industry placement. And obviously in policy terms, they're completely different. But an employer may not necessarily understand the nuances because they're not getting policy statements and policy steers from DfE on a daily basis. They're just hearing a college talk to them about taking on learners as part of a program as well. So it's making sure they fully understand the size and complexity, but also the advantages and opportunities as well. Some things that are more difficult to overcome. So quite a lot, and it's still an ongoing theme, of course, is about what I call geographical isolation. So up in the northeast or down in the southwest, where we have a large number of colleges, but the employment opportunity for T-levels is more limited because of geography or because of sector specialisms. There are hotspots of employers around the country, perhaps digital or construction or manufacturing, which are not therefore universally spread. So although we might have a specialism in our college, we actually haven't got employers as an outlet for it. So do we need to rethink our curriculum to service the need of employers locally, which might give us quite a different curriculum mix to the one we're currently working with? So there's questions to ask and to think about that as well. So that really comes on to your absolute strategy. What do we want T-levels to do for us as well? So as I said, T-levels are still new programs, so there's still evolving work around that. A lot of employers have not had a lot of touch points with T-levels. There may be a lot of employers who may be very willing and able to support who have not really had an opportunity to talk about it as well. Some employers expressing desire, particularly the smaller employers in local areas, to help shape the curriculum, either to support the delivery of the curriculum or to think about the way in which the curriculum is sequenced. And later on, we'll talk about in the curriculum strategic area about how we might start to think about curriculum slightly differently as well. But certainly in some of the earlier waves, there's a lot of examples available of where employers are, if you like, co-designing and co-delivering the curriculum. They will come to us, they will deliver sessions, we will send learners to them outside of industry placements to have a look at equipment and the way in which some of these things are undertaken. Okay, next area, please, Richard. Thank you. So key questions that employers ask, and these are consistent questions that come up time and again. So a lot of the webinars that I'm part of ask these same kind of questions as well. So the first big area is, well, who's responsible? We've got safeguarding, we've got insurance, we've got access to confidential information. So who if you like looks after those learners? Who pays for travel? How do we manage out of hours working? And the new policy document that came out from DfE this week talks about the ways in which we have accountability for it, then it rests very much with the college. So how will we do out of hours or lone working or weekend working? What about if an employer wants to pay their placement learner because that's what they do as part of their culture? How would we manage expenses and that sort of thing as well? What about the administration? Will it take a lot of time? I've got members of staff who've got their day jobs to do and they're adding a learner alongside who doesn't know very much and they're having to look after them. What benefits are there to us as well? And one of the key questions that we get, in terms of recruitment at the early part of a program is, well, do we get to meet the learners? Are we allocated learners? Can we interview them? Can we be sure they're high caliber? I mean, we know as far as policy is concerned, the T-level should be the first consideration after GCSEs. So the high achieving, high caliber learner should be actively choosing T-levels. And so they should be high caliber and there should be an opportunity to get the right learner with the right placement as well. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the industry placements themselves. So there's a lot of work going on around industry placements. There are a lot of webinars and briefings and day events and certainly a number of AOC events as well. So how can employers support IP recruitment? So we're not saying employers are just the recipients. They sit back and are receiving learners, but they're part of that program as well. And how can employers work together, perhaps a supply chain, because there are flexibilities about how to deliver the different types of placement model, whether it be day release or mixed mode, or might be block release. You can use two employers, they could be working together. There may be actually disparate employers that have no relationship with one another. It might even be competitors, but they're still able to come together to support a T-level learner as well. And there are other flexibilities that can build employers in as well. How do we describe placements to employers? Now, those employers who work successfully with colleges at the moment are very clear what a placement is. They understand how it's different from work experience. They understand how it's different from recruiting an apprentice to an apprenticeship vacancy. But it's still a training placement. It's still an element of supporting them to develop. So how clear are the learning objectives? How clear is the curriculum to those employers as well? And how do we show those success stories as being a benefit of placements? There are a number of success stories of learners who've added significant value, are valued members of the team, have been recruited and are now progressing on to higher education programs, perhaps as a degree apprenticeship whilst employed with the same employer who offered them the placement. Again, thinking about how placements can work both ways is something to think about as well. Thank you. Next slide, Richard. So here's a big one, curriculum planning. A lot of time and effort is spent around curriculum planning in colleges. Now, with 9 months to go, you should know what programs you're looking to offer and how that curriculum might work. But it's hard, because how would we get a group of, pick a number, 20 learners in a particular occupational specialism or T-level? And each of them is going to have an individual curriculum because their industry placement might require a slightly different sequence. Well, how on earth are we going to timetable all those different varieties of particularly the core and the occupational specialism at the same time? What about if an employer wants something different? Well, we're unique. We have a slightly different structure. Can you accommodate this? And it's a difficult challenge to overcome. And it's not always easy to do that, especially if you have a small number of employers or there's an element of geography involved or sector involved where there's more travel, or it's very niche, or actually the employer placement requirement only covers a small part of the specialism as opposed to the wide variety. And it's quite difficult to make it all work. And so there are key questions to ask around curriculum. And it's probably the area you'll spend most of your time thinking about as well. So the idea of individual against group planning, how do we cater for the individual needs whilst also maintaining a kind of coherent group that's sensible and manageable with the staffing resource that we have? Oh, there's a question about what staffing resource we might need as well. We've also got, obviously, the Ofsteds of this world looking at the work that we're doing. How do we show our intent and particularly the impact of our learning with such a diverse range of teaching and learning strategies? We've got examinations, we have assessment and assignment work, we have project work, and we have the placement as well. And whilst the placement doesn't have an examination or a registrable component to it, we do have to complete defined learning objectives, and how they link to the curriculum is really important as well. So that idea of the meaningful core and specialism before we go on placement, managing to make sure that those learners are useful to the employer on employment. Because a lot of employers will say, look, what we need before they come is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is quite different to the employer next door, even though we're on the same program, because their business focus is slightly different as well. And obviously the way in which employers want to deliver their placements can be wildly different. I remember one particular company that's got 4 placement learners, but each of them is on a different program. There are 2 that do 1 day because they're working in a particular project where they can do 1 day a week over an entire year. Whereas another learner just in the next office is on block release. Don't come to us until March. We'll keep you from March until the end of May, because that's when we've got a piece of project work available to you. So same college, same employer, but 4 different programs for the different learners as well. It becomes a significant challenge for us as well. Next slide, please, Richard. Thank you. So here's some models. So I won't dwell too long on these models because you can have access to these later on and after today. But these are some of the models of curriculum delivery. So again, just let the kind of diagram wash over us. So in year 1, we have core knowledge, core skills. We focus very much on delivering the common core. So probably not a lot of placement activity in the first year. So if you're starting in 2023, you may not need to have learners on placement until 2024 with this model as well. So they're delivering most of those core areas so that when placements start, there's a fighting chance that quite a lot of the employer requirement is already covered by the core. And then in year 2, we focus very much on specialism, which might be done alongside the placement, so those 2 come hand in hand. And again, some thinking about the curriculum is important as well, to make sure that the specialism, where we start to drill down a little bit further, is still relevant to the placement. And if the placement employer can be part of that thinking, then all the better as well. Next model, please, Richard. Thank you. So here's a slightly different model where we take a step back and think, okay, how do we actually deliver the entire program in a sequence and systematic way and start to bring placements in a little bit earlier? So this time, rather than having examinations in year one for the core, we actually don't have examinations till the end of year two. It's a slightly higher risk strategy because there's fewer examination windows available, but it means that we're able to start thinking about implementing the core and occupational specialism earlier with employers. So placements can start earlier and we kind of all learn together and we start to deliver core competencies. So when it comes to the examination window at the end of year two, learners are more than prepared for examinations. So there's a different model in terms of planning. And again, you might say, well, for one program or one specialism, we'll have that option. And for the second program, we'll have a slightly different option. Certainly some T-level core requirements are huge and have a huge amount of time required to deliver. So you probably think, well, actually trying to do it all in 1 year would be a significant challenge. And then to be examined on it as well is an opportunity for it to be less successful. So again, an alternative model for delivery as well. And next slide, please, Richard. Thank you. And here is another set of headaches for us. So what about if we try to do a lot of it together, but we start to modularize it? We start to think about how we can bespoke elements for different employers as well. So for example, we have in a semester-based model, we do a little bit of core, a little bit of skills development and occupational specialism, and we could possibly have an element of placement. And then we move to a different topic area and we have core and occupational specialism together. And we might have classes where we can move those around. So there is an element of bespoking where some employers who might want the earlier element done first can do that and start the placement. And there'll be some for which actually it's the second semester that's more important. We might be able to move that around as well. So it's thinking it much more as a modularized program as opposed to a linear program where everything's in scope all the time. So it's just ways to think about how you might start to deliver and sequence the curriculum as well. Richard, next slide, please. Thank you. So how does this impact on us and professional development? How do we start to think about how we prepare ourselves as well? So we need to make sure that our teams are suitably qualified and experienced, so they're actually ready to go in terms of programs. We might not have those skills at the moment. Certainly if you're thinking about delivering for the employer base around, as opposed to what we do very well, that mix might look quite different as well. And it's not just the academic staff delivering the programs. We've got obviously welfare support, student services, and the employee engagement teams, but also those working with schools in terms of schools liaison as well. There's lots going on. So we might think about an element of doing a gap analysis and working out what skills we think we're going to need, where we are now, and what we can do about it. And sometimes those skills gaps can be fulfilled with employers being part of the curriculum as well. So not just having them as extra teachers, but how we might use their resources and their equipment and their setup in order to inform our teaching and planning as well. So at what point do we need to recruit skills gaps? And 9 months out is about the time we start to think about any recruitment we might need. It might take time to work through how we would employ, how we would recruit, whether it would be sessional, fractional, or on a kind of a friendly basis with employers to come in and run sessions. There's all sorts of questions to ask. And again, after the curriculum, our professional readiness is the biggest headache, if you like, in terms of planning a strategy as well. Next slide, please, Richard. So let's ask ourselves the question. So we're having an opportunity for breakout session later. So then questions to ask. What staff do we need for curriculum development? So actually putting together programs to deliver the technical work, so the teaching and learning element of it as well. What about the wider form of student support, not just traditional student support, but actually managing, administering placements and liaison with employers, managing out of hours contacts. What about weekend working? All of that as well. And that overall relationship management with employers, because we're not selling placements to employers. Well, we are, but we're doing more than that. It's not just a case of signing up an employer to a placement and here's your learner. It's more sophisticated than that. So how do we start to create that as well? So the questions are, how do we upskill existing staff? And therefore, what's the gap? What's the requirement for new staff we might have as well? Okay, one more slide from me. Thank you, Richard. And so this is one of the, again, more questions about how we go ahead and how we start to hit our professional readiness as well. So question, how is staff within T-level programs deployed to maximize the impact of skills? So do we have other skills that staff may have that actually start to bring about change. And one of the projects that we've seen going in a couple of colleges is about kind of matrix structures and agile groups where colleagues will come in and out depending on whether it's recruitment, early industry placement, management, curriculum design, delivery, or actually preparing for examinations, or actually just going ahead and supporting examination success as well. What are excuse me, what are our systems and processes? What documentation, what tracking systems, what software, what type of meeting structure, what kind of admin do we want to think about as well? Think about those central functions as well. How do we start to use the expertise of those staff to deliver T-levels as well? And is there a role for the wider HR? Because there will be. We might need to have staff available across holidays, evenings, weekends, 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, possibly, if that's what the employer needs from their placement learner, and they're very happy to do that, and we're happy to sign off on that, is going to need extra support as well. So that wider kind of professional readiness is an area to have a think about as well. Okay, that's the 5 themes just in outline from me. We'll obviously have an opportunity to discuss it in breakout groups later, but I'll hand us back now to Tony for the next bit. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you very much, Chris. There'll be an opportunity to ask Chris questions later after the feedback from the breakout rooms. But now, if I may, I would turn to Jenna for the presentation. Thank you, Jenna.
If I'll ask a question while Jenna's trying to sort her sound out. I was wondering your thoughts on the announcements last week on the sort of flexibilities around placement that the government announced, whether there are any sort of, whether you had some creative thinking around how that can be best twisted.
Yes, yeah, I mean, it's 51 pages to digest as well, of which 20 is kind of policy stuff about what a placement actually is. I think what DFE are having to tackle is the concept of home working, remote working, and delivering placements that linked enough to the curriculum. So being able to make sure that when you have a placement learner, you don't just go and do, 2 or 3 small objectives, but actually it's a more comprehensive program that's really embedding them into workplace. So I think one of the policy shifts is about making sure that learning objectives are agreed in advance. So the whole concept of working flexibly, remotely is now part of the mix, but without endorsing purely home working. Because 18 months ago, when obviously we all had to work from home, it was almost impossible to manage placements. And so DFE was saying things like, well, we can't have placements with employees in their pajamas, and you've got to feel like you're going to work. It's a workplace experience. So I think that's starting to shake out a bit as well. The concept of multiple employers and more flexible ways of delivering it, I think, is now clearer. But I don't see any kind of huge seismic shifts in placement policy from earlier waves. I think it's a case of if you can show a need to do something slightly differently, that it might be possible. And as long as it's documented, as long as it's agreed, as long as it fulfills safeguarding and insurance, and the employer, who's the most important part, signs off on it, then it's something we can have a look at. And then we can still go back and have a look more at those 51 pages and see if there's anything hidden in there. But I don't see anything that's kind of allows us to be purely flexible. What would have been nice to have seen is you can now work fully remotely, and you can be supervised remotely, but not have to go to, say, an FE venue or an approved employers to do your remote working. That might be something, because certainly in the digital world, and certainly when we did some of the case studies for digital, they will say everybody works from home. Everybody does it that way, and we come together on Zoom, and that's how we have our group meetings. And that's not possible for T-level. We've got to almost create something artificial just because it's a T-level. There's one more admin job as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, while we're waiting, Richard, could we just go to the last slide? We had some reminders, so I might as well introduce them now. And while we're waiting, we can put some links in. I just wanted to thank you for that, Chris. Just wanted to take the opportunity to remind you that if you haven't done so already, please make sure your T-levels are advertised on the T-level course directory, so that you can promote your T-levels in the Careers Service website. It's updated, then everyone can see what you've been, potential students, employees, and so on. Reminder that the capital bid is due in on the 3rd of February at 12 noon. Okay, I think that is important, 12 noon. So if you are doing one, please make sure you meet that time. Do look out for the specialist equipment allocation. So everybody will get this. It's for allocations will be made in early 2023, probably around January, well, late January, early February, I should think. And funding paid in the spring of 2023. You will be allocated the specialist equipment allocation for any T-level route being delivered in 2023 that you haven't delivered previously. The specialist equipment allocation is a contribution to the cost of equipment to support T-level delivery. Providers make a similar contribution where that is something they can afford. The match funding there is not an absolute requirement. Okay, a reminder that you will need to get your approval from the awarding organisations in February 23, and this applies to you even if you have an existing relationship for other courses. All right, that will open in February 23, closing June 23. In our experience, it's probably best if you do that as soon as you can, because then you have access to all the resources. We're going to put in the chat now, while we're waiting, link to the latest T-level industry delivery guidance, which Chris just mentioned. And we're also going to put in there the new Connect with employers who are interested in T-levels. That's a service for employers who want to show they're interested in T-levels. Okay, that's some of the notices I was going to give you at the end. If we can just see how Jenna's doing.
So, I am here. My name is Jenna Allen. I am the higher level technical skills manager from New College Durham. So we were a Wave 1 provider. We started delivering T-levels in construction, digital and childcare in September 2020. So I'm going to share a bit about our experience here at New College Durham, but mainly the construction route, which falls within my area. So, as I've just said, we started with construction, the design, surveying and planning qualification, early years educator, and digital production design and development. We've now extended that offer, so we also offer mechanical engineering, and next year we also plan to include business and administration and creative in design. Numbers started very low, so particularly in construction, we had 4 on year 1 of the programme, and the retention was a bit of an issue at the start, but we have seen significant growth. So the plan for me today is to give you a bit of reassurance and share some lessons that we've learned along the way, so hopefully you can benefit from some of those lessons. Next slide, please. So, construction, design, surveying and planning. We started with the surveying and design for construction in the built environment route. I just want to give you some reassurance really, because we did have our doubts at the start. It's been a long journey, but we have had excellent destinations for our first cohort that have just progressed to the next level of study in the summer. So we had 100% success rate of our students gaining employment with their placement company, which was fantastic. So they've all gained employment and progressed onto degree level apprenticeships at university. We did have some questions from one of the universities around the content of the course. So they wanted to know a little bit more about the content areas that they've covered, and more specifically some of the learning objectives. Obviously, we were more than happy to share that information with them, and they were happy that they met the entry criteria for that course. We have had 100% pass rate, like I say, for our year 2 students who completed in the summer, but also for our year 1 students that completed their core exams in the summer. So obviously we're all over the moon with that. I don't know whether the staff or the students were more excited about those results, but it was really, really good news, and we were, over the moon with those results. We've benefited from employer engagement, so we've put a lot of time into employer engagement, making sure obviously that the placements are there for our students, that there's valuable learning opportunities for our students, but we felt the benefit as a whole curriculum area, not just for T levels. We're seeing the benefits across our whole offer, so I really can't recommend enough how important and how good the benefits of employer engagement are. And as I've said, we started with really low numbers, so We had 4 students that have just completed the course in the summer. We've got 5 students currently on year 2, which again is very low. However, we've got 22 students on year 1 in construction, and we've already had the same number of applications ready to start in September 2023. So we're seeing huge growth for T-level programmes. And we're also finding that, you know, students are coming to us asking for T-levels now. And the last 2 years previously, we've had to do a lot of, you know, selling to parents and students to, you know, ensure them that this is going to be a successful qualification and they are going to get what they need and ultimately find a job in industry from it. But they're getting the message at school now, which is really, you know, good to see for us here at the college. Next slide, please. So our current offer here at New College Durham, especially in construction, we ran traditional BTEC programmes. So we ran the foundation diploma and extended diploma for full-time students. You know, it's tried and tested, it's valued by industry. There was a lot of questions around why should we change something that isn't necessarily broken in terms of the students getting jobs at the end of it. So, you know, it was quite a challenge to get the staff on board, to get obviously the students and parents to buy into it as well. It has been hard work and it's taken a lot of time to sort of educate people on T-levels, because I feel like the information maybe wasn't readily available for them in 2020. So we've done a lot of the hard work. I think you should find that students coming through now already do have at least an awareness of T-levels, which will be a big help. So there's 3 main lessons that we've learned here at New College. The main one being around employer engagement and work placement. So I'm going to share some information around that and things that we've, you know, tried and tested. There'll be some tips I'll share on planning and delivery, so around timetable and placement models. And then I was also going to share some information on facilities and equipment and things that we found useful for delivery of T-levels here at the college. Next slide, please. So I think the biggest thing we have learned with employers is that at the start, we were almost pleading with companies to take students for a long period of time, and we've totally changed our approach. We've realised now that we're doing employers the favour. You know, T-levels have been created in areas with skill shortages. Employers need our students. So what we're selling this as now is a pipeline, as has already been mentioned earlier in the session, but this is a pipeline, you know, direct to employment. Employers can pick from a cohort of students. They're getting involved with reviewing CVs. They're holding interviews for our students. So we're not just popping a student into a placement opportunity. They're really buying into the process and treating it as a recruitment process for their organisation. They're investing a lot of time into these young people, and I think they're now seeing that the best situation here is that they are offering that young person an opportunity, a permanent opportunity at the end of it. So like I say, we've already had 4 success stories here at the college, which we're really proud of. But you know, we hope to see a lot more, and I think that's the attitude that employers are seeming to, you know, be taking now. It can be really difficult. I know this will not be the same across all curriculum areas, but specifically in construction, projects are moving around the country all the time. Companies are working in, you know, locally 1 minute and then they're not a few months later. So it can be tricky to find long-term placements. But we're finding that companies they're writing these placements into bids now. It's helping them to win work. So they are actually coming to us now as well to find out more information about T-levels and where they can get the best students, like I say, to ultimately train up for employment. I've listed some of the benefits there. So we've also used it, you know, as a mentoring opportunity for employers, you know, staff who they're wanting to progress themselves or develop further within their organisation. It's a really good opportunity for them to mentor a young person and develop their own management skills, but also sort of build that partnership with a college where we can help other areas of the curriculum area as well. So it might be that, you know, they can tap into your higher education students, or maybe start to work with crafts areas or business and sort of really build up a stronger relationship with the college in all areas. I've found that open events can be really useful for building new connections. So I think there's almost well, sometimes there's a bit of stigma around education for employers, particularly in the construction sector. We need to be as sort of open and transparent as we can about things. So I try to hold an employer open event one Friday afternoon every term if I can. And it's basically just an open opportunity for employers to come in, view the college facilities, have a chat to a couple of our students, and just have any questions answered that they may have. So I'll maybe do, you know, if they've got any questions about apprenticeships, if they've got any questions about higher technical qualifications, there's always questions about T-levels, but regardless of what they come in for, I use it as a T-level opportunity as well. And we have had quite a few new partnerships built up from that, so that's quite a useful thing to do. Another thing on work placements that I found very useful is that because you'll start to get students who are applying for your courses now, make sure that the information they're getting from the very first encounter with the college is that this placement is non-negotiable. It's a compulsory part of the qualification, so they need to take ownership and responsibility for that. If you're telling them that message in front of their parents also take on the responsibility as well. So we've found that they're coming to us on their first day in September, and a lot of them have, you know, they've got the name of someone, or they've got a company that they've been looking at. There's normally a friend of the family or something like that. I mean, obviously we can't rely on this for all students, but it gets a few off your list straight away if they've already made that connection themselves. We've had students who found placements using the chat function on websites and things like that. So there's so many more sort of innovative ways that the students are coming up with themselves. So, you know, really tap into that and see if you can get students to get their own opportunities as well. And we've benefited from different networks and employer forums. So it really sort of some useful groups for us in construction is Constructing Excellence. We've sort of teamed up with our local Constructing Excellence and asked them to pass on the message to their employers. The Civil Engineering Contractors Association, any sort of employer representatives are more than happy to share the message for you as far and wide as they can within their network. So that's been really useful. And also your staff networks as well. If any of your staff have come from industry recently and have, you know, networks on platforms like LinkedIn, for example, we've built up some really good relationships with people who've seen what we're doing on social media, on LinkedIn, and they've sort of connected with us that way as well, which we've found to be quite useful. Next slide, please. So on to planning and delivery, I must admit this had us stumped at the start. We did feel that we were going to go with delivering in content areas. We started that way in 2020, sort of trying to stick to the content areas as much as possible, and we realised that it's just not the best way to deliver the qualification. So after I think it was about 4 weeks of going that way, we did a big mapping activity with the staff involved in the delivery of the programme, and we matched content areas to staff. So the way that we've timetabled this course is that you have, you know, lessons with staff member number 1, staff member number 2, and staff member number 3, and they have their lists of content that needs to be delivered within their sessions, within the amount of hours that they've been allocated throughout the timetable. We deliver for 3.5 days a week. So the half day is timetabled for enrichment opportunities and activities, and the free day, that's where we expect the work placement to take part, if possible. So the model that we're pushing and promoting as much as possible is that students will attend the workplace 1 day per week. I know that it's not, it doesn't suit all employers, and it has been mentioned already. So we've, for that reason, allocated block weeks attached to half-term holidays as well. So we do a block week in October and a block week in February, where students can, you know, do up to 2 weeks in the workplace at those times as well. Obviously, over the summer, the exams for T-levels take place quite early, so you do have quite a big window of opportunity as well in that summer. between year 1 and year 2, where a substantial amount of hours can be built up. In terms of designing the curriculum, if you like, and sequencing, we massively focused on health and safety at the very start. So it's quite, we front load, if you like, the health and safety elements of the course. And for construction in particular, we also put our students through a CSCS card, because we found that that's made them much more attractive to employers. So I'd highly recommend seeing if there's anything that you can kind of bolt on or add on to your course to make your students more valuable to employers, so that they can get the best opportunities that are out there for them. We don't have any specific sort of maths and English lessons, because we've made it an entry requirement of the course. So we ask for grade 5s in maths and English, particularly for the construction course. So yes, maths, English and digital is embedded right throughout the qualification, but we don't have any specific sessions to worry about in terms of timetabling. And going back to the models, you can see on my slide there, all T-levels in the college have opted for the year 1 core content, and then occupational specialism in year 2. And the main reason for this was, well, there's 2 main reasons, but one is just for the benefit of the student. They know what they're focusing their full attention on each year. And I think it's already been mentioned as well, the exam opportunities, the resit opportunities are there in this model, not so much if you're doing core content alongside your occupational specialism. Another point just to note was around planning of assessment. So there is substantial assessment within the T-level qualifications, and it's worth looking at the sort of requirements, what file types are required to be submitted and that kind of thing. And I'm sure it's not a problem in digital, but some of my staff were, were left trying to convert file types and things like that, when the exam files had been created, converting video files and things like that. So it's just worth looking in advance, well in advance, at what kind of file types you're supposed to be submitting to your awarding body, and making sure you've got that technical support should you need it. And the final one for me, please. So just some facilities and equipment. We're really lucky here at the college. We have had substantial investment in the facilities for and equipment for T-levels. I think some of the main ones I've listed there for you. AutoCAD and Revit for construction is an absolute, a minimum. Maybe if you have Google SketchUp, I think it can be used as an alternative, but we found that this is really heavily used throughout both the core year and the occupational specialism. Also surveying equipment. So you don't need an awful lot of it, but for the practical assessment for year 2 for your occupational specialism last year, every student had to complete a facade survey, and it was videoed. So thinking about the time constraints and how much equipment have you got, so that these videos can maybe be done simultaneously and that kind of thing. So it can be expensive equipment to purchase, but it's worth having it, because as these numbers grow on the courses, there's going to be more and more requirement or sort of impact to your staff during the assessment windows. We've found that virtual reality has been a nice to have, not necessarily a necessity throughout delivery, but it's really helped our students to understand, beyond what you can see with your eye when they're going to site visits and things like that. They're getting talks from employers on, for example, pile foundations and that kind of thing. And we've been able to use virtual reality to kind of go underground and show them what that looks like. And I think they've seen a real benefit from that. And there's also some digital. In terms of digital, they've found that they've needed to purchase equipment and software that's used in industry. So that's been a requirement more from the employers that they're working with as well. And then in terms of health, they've made investment into simulation mannequins. So they've got an award set up again with VR capabilities, so they can change the scenes around them, which has been really useful for them. But mainly use your employers. There's some content in construction around drones, and so we've secured an employer who's more than happy to come in and do a demonstration and talk to students. And I think you shouldn't worry too much about it, if there is a specialist area where you don't have that skill set, because let's face it, nobody's an expert in everything, but this is where your employers really are happy to help. If you can, sweeten them up in that they are the expert and you really want your students to hear it from them, we've found that they are really happy to help. It's just, having that forward planning and getting in touch with them in time to get them secured in at the right periods throughout your delivery. And that is it from me. I'm happy to answer any questions if there's any questions. And sorry once again so much for that technical hiccup that I had earlier.
No, first of all, thank you very much, Jenna. That was really interesting. What I think we do now is we would like to go into the breakout rooms so people can have a chance to discuss something that both you and Chris have covered. So we'll do that now, probably for about 10 minutes, and then we'll regroup. We're keen to know, where are you now? Where are you heading? And what are you going to take away from this meeting? So thank you, Jenna and Chris, for your content. We'll come back in 10 minutes and have a recap, and then we can cover any questions you have. We're now going to go into the breakout rooms. Okay, welcome everybody. I do apologise that was a bit quick, but I hope you had a chance to raise a few points. So we'll just go around the rooms. We want to take questions, so we'll be very quick. If I can start, then first of all, quick bit of feedback from Richard, please.
Oh, excellent. I found the unmute button. Excellent. Yes, so we had an interesting sort of chat. A number of people in the room mentioned that they hadn't considered the ability to use the half terms potentially for placements, and that they were going to take that away and look at how that might be applied in their setting. And also, there was definitely a view that visiting other providers, other schools and colleges who are already delivering T-levels and finding out how they've arranged their curriculum would also be beneficial, and would support hopefully they wouldn't make the same mistakes or learn the best practice when developing their own curriculum.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Richard. Lauren, can I come to you, please?
So in my group, they were sort of mixed bits and pieces. So some thought that they were on track, others sort of concerned about getting employers on board. And that was sort of conversation that we had. Others sort of feel 50-50 confidence-wise. Looking at sort of the industry placements, one provider is looking nationally, so going to sort of local councils. It has been a slow uptake. Moving forwards, one provider is going to focus on the bidding and producing that beautiful shopping list. Another is looking at sort of, again, pushing the employer engagement and securing the placements, because that seems to sort of be the biggest concern. But it was commented on how Jenna had said about the SES cards. So again, looking into that and seeing if that could be incorporated.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Lauren. Nick.
Well, one thing that came out of Chris's presentation is the entry requirement. So there were some concerns, for example, that the students who tend to gravitate, for example, towards construction kind of programs, perhaps some of them haven't got good maths and English GCSE grades. And just like Durham College, I've come across a college in London as well that has set their entry requirements at grade 5s. And kind of the elephant is in the room. Well, what's happening with all the other students, perhaps who've got grades 3s and 4s in GCSEs, and how are they supported to progress to T levels?
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. Jim.
So most of our discussions revolve around the industry placement challenges and how to work around these. And I think sort of networking with the employers, that's quite important one. Just getting them ready and just selling it to the employers in terms of what are the benefits for the employers for them to take the students on as well. So we came up with some good ideas about this as well. So that was the main discussions that we were having about industry placements.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibrahim. If I come to you, Paul, please.
Yeah, generally what's going quite well is is existing relationships with employers, and that's especially around early years, well-established relationships. There was a discussion around some universities that aren't accepting T-levels, that will feed up to Kathleen at the AOC there, and also an interesting discussion around employer boards recognizing their value, but how to set one up for early years that works well. And Jenna gave some really good feedback on that. In terms of planning, people seem to be on course, but there is a realization that time flies away from you all.
Okay, thank you. Come to you, Jim.
Yeah, we had a discussion mainly about being sensitive to the needs and the availability and the flexibility of the employers. It's some employers can accept 1 day a week. Some employers would prefer a week here and a week there. Some employers would prefer a block release, and it could vary through the student's pathway through the T-level. They might not always be on a day release model. They might go to a different employer and have a different model to pursue. So it's about being flexible with the employers. And Darren in my group spoke well about the commitment to have bespoke work placement and employer engagement stuff that work better than maybe the delivery stuff doubling up to try to talk to employers, because they are very different ways of working, and it's because you're a good teacher doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good at employer engagement and vice versa. So there was a lot of talk around things like that, and I think that the watchword was the need to be flexible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, lovely. Thank you, Jim. And just to finish then on my group before we take questions, it was a tale of two providers really. One provider ready, making good progress, partly stemming from the fact that they had already got their industry placements because of the courses they'd been running in the past. So that infinitely made the path forward clearer. And their main concern moving forward was curriculum planning. Whereas for the other provider, because unfortunately a member of staff had been on maternity leave, things had fallen into a bit of disarray, and they were not as ready as they could be, would be the way of putting it. But apart from that, it's employer engagement seems to be the key thing at this stage, because once that is in place, then your curriculum planning can move forward easier. So that's my group, and to say thank you to all the AOC people for feeding back. We now go to our colleagues. We have Jenna and Chris here. Are there any questions arising out of this today about where you're heading that you would like to ask them? Oh, you're all confident where you're heading.
No good.
Well, in that case, just while you're having a think, and before I just come to Chris, I'm going to ask my colleague to put the evaluation in the chat so you can, I know you can multitask, so you can be having a look at that while we're talking. Chris, I'll come to you in a moment, Jenna, as well, if I may. Any concluding thoughts on what you've heard from the feedback and where we are now?
Yes, definitely. So I was noting the kind of the key feedback points against those strategic areas, and those that come up again consistently is working with employers. So how do we set up employer liaison groups? How do we probably as a region work with employers without us constantly mindering them and calling them and chasing them, and then large employers in particular being contacted by 5 colleges, all of whom with something slightly different. There's one about kind of, I think, understanding how we collectively approach employers, and also not just to receive placements, but actually be part of the kind of inner working of the curriculum as well. The next one was around our kind of own skills and skills needs, about how we're preparing ourselves. So 9 months is enough time to think about what kind of skills mix we might need to better deliver placements effectively. And then this kind of third one really is about the kind of the program recruitment. So we heard a couple of questions about, oh my goodness, we hadn't realized that perhaps T levels are at the upper end of the recruitment line. I think if you have a mindset that a T level is the first choice of a Learn Exceed GCSE, and if they're not able to make the grade for that, then what other options are available to them? So I think Jenny talked about setting, you must get your maths, at least grade 5 in order to progress onto any program, and make that a prerequisite, so it doesn't become a requirement to teach maths and English during the program. I know in my curriculum slides I did offer the opportunity of where maths and English might be delivered, because there is opportunity for some programs to support that. But actually, as a concept, having them as a high level entry, high quality learners, first choice destination, etc., is an important one. And that means that obviously universities can then follow on over time and appreciate how those that achieve T levels can move on to HE. So I think things that came out consistently as well.
Thank you very much, Chris. Jenna, could I just come to you, please? Any thoughts on what you've heard?
Yeah, just again on the entry requirements, we decided to set that quite high due to the content of the T level. It's tough. It's an exam-based qualification. There's a lot of maths in there, and if you struggled at GCSE, chances are you're going to struggle at T level, at level 3 as well. So that was a decision we made. I didn't mention we have still been running BTEC alongside as well. So we've had a grade 4 entry requirement to the BTEC alongside, but obviously that's not going to be around for much longer for our full-time students. So so yeah, that was the thinking behind that. Just again, for those of you who are building your connections with employers, I think it's important to note as well that make it clear to them they're not going to be left on their own. We're not expecting them to educate a young person for 9 weeks or for 315 hours. We are very much there to support them through the whole process. Whether you've got a work placement officer or it's the curriculum team, we're there to help them set the objectives. We're there to support them with finding opportunities to meet those objectives, and the communication continues, the whole way throughout the placement, and it is important to, keep reminding them of that. Yeah, and otherwise, just thank you and apologies again for the technical issues.
Okay, well, we've got a quick poll on Zoom. Okay, Abby, yeah, I do apologise. Just while you were here, Abby, would you like to launch that poll? Oh, I beg your pardon, we're just having trouble with the evaluation form. Could you just complete this poll on that you can see on your screen, please? We just had a bit of a problem with the evaluation link, so we make sure you get one after this meeting. Okay. Once you finish that poll, it remains me to say thank you all for coming today. We will send you an evaluation. It would be helpful if you could complete it. Sorry we've had a few technical hiccups today, but I think the content has been fantastic. Once again, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jenna, for your time today. And we may see some of you tomorrow. There's a question and answer session, a chance to see what other Wave 1 and Wave 2 providers are doing if you want to do that. And don't forget, do look at the brochure. There's lots of other events where you can meet practitioners up and down the country. So thank you all for your attendance today. Look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.